Hey there, I'm Chris, and today we are going to inquire whether or not all sins are equal. We will do so in a very scientific manner, using partially even mathematical formalism. But first, about the contents. We are going to talk about what sin is. We also will refer to the moral codex. Then we will speak about action according to moral. In this context, we will also talk about comparing and intellectualizing moral codex. Then we will speak about sin according to morals. We will visualize sins, or the concept of sin. We will speak about forms of action, where sin is written or recorded. In this context, we will also speak about the sin transferred to the descendants. We will speak about forms of memory of our system, epigenetics, intensity of emotion, amygdala, and in this context I will also refer to a survey. We will speak about what is actually the origin of sin. We will speak about identity and images, and I will make some examples. In this context, I will also refer to the Bible verse, "Make yourself no images on earth and in heaven." Then we will speak about sin against the Holy Spirit. In this, here is an example from the Bible about Ananias and Sapphira. We will speak about limited identity, and in this context also about the Holy Spirit. And in the end, we are going to conclude whether or not all sins are equal. We will speak about life and separation. So, let's start with sin. What is sin? Sin has to be based on some moral codex. Otherwise, we are not able to define sin. So, we have to have some moral codex, which I abbreviate with the symbol M. For example, this moral codex may include statements like, "You shall not kill." There may also be another negative statement like, "You shall not lie." And maybe another one, a positive statement like, "You shall respect your parents." Now we can think about many statements here up to some number n, and n is such a natural number like 10, 11, 100, whatever, some natural number. So a moral is actually a set of some statements M1, M2, M3, up to some statement Mn, and n is a natural number. So we are talking about some beliefs here, negative or positive beliefs or statements. Now let's take a look at our list of contents. We have now already defined what moral codex means, and on the basis of this, we can talk about action according to moral. Generally, we have action which is based on belief, and we have action which is not based on belief. For example, you may have the belief to work hard will pay off. Based on that belief, you will work a lot. There may be also a person who dissolved all his beliefs and still he acts. So, when we talk about action, in the sense that action is based on belief, we shall call it limited action. Now, limited action, according to some moral codex M, I define as A of M. Now, having all these statements, not to kill, not to lie, and to respect the parents and so on, maybe also a statement like enjoy your life or whatever, we have to sum up all these statements from 1 to n and weigh them with some factor which is a rational number. Why a rational number? Because all these statements have to put into relationship. One should be able to compare and bring all these statements into some context. Our ratio works by bringing things into relationship. Therefore, every action, according to the moral, must be representable by this sum. So, for example, I shall not kill, I shall not lie, I shall enjoy my life. Then I have to think about enjoying my life without killing anybody and without lying. So, for example, when I think about enjoying life, I think about money, and then I think about working in a bank, but then I have to think about not to lie and to draw conclusions from that. Bringing all that into a relationship, we have a resulting action which is based on a moral codex. Now, what is sin? According to a moral codex. Sin, according to a moral codex, is every element which is not representable in this form. So, for sin, the following thing is true. There are no qi with I 1, 2 to n so that S of m equals a sum over I mi qi. And qi, these are rational numbers once again. So we cannot represent sin as an action which results from this moral codex. First of all, I want to mention that here we can already see that living according to a moral codex will necessarily lead to comparison. You will start comparing yourself with others and develop some sense of perfectionism. Also, this perfectionism will lead to some intellectualization of the moral codex. This is the reason why the Pharisees made the rules more and more complex. Now, I want to visualize sin. Let's assume for the moment that life, or the possibilities in life, are three-dimensional. So everything you could do is inside this cube. You can move inside that cube. So you have a cube, and inside that cube you can move. You can move whichever way you want. That's your possibilities when you are free. So that's the free trajectory or path. But now you have boundary conditions, namely the moral codex. So you have a path which is conditioned by certain assumptions. These assumptions are fixed boundary conditions, and you have to walk according to these boundary conditions. So for example, when M only is made up of two assumptions, E1 and E2, and E1 is given by this direction and E2 is given by this direction. So these are two independable assumptions and therefore fixed dimensions. Then your motion can only happen inside one of these planes. So we can only move inside that plane and not perpendicular to it. So your action is always limited in the sense that there are boundary conditions which you cannot surpass when you want to live a truthful or life which is not sinful in that sense. So it is limited action according to some moral codex M. Now let's have a look at our list of contents. We talked about action according to moral, and we defined sin according to moral. Also, I already visualized what is sin, and now, as we talked about action and sinful action, we can talk about which forms of action are there actually. Forms of action. This question refers to the question, which degrees of freedom does a human being have actually? We can use our body, we can do sport, we can dance, we can lay in a bed, we can do everything. We can use thinking. This is already the second degree of freedom or dimension of our action. Then we have emotion. And there are also vital energies in the sense that our body has to be vitalized by something. For example, when you eat, this food will be transferred into some energy. Also, you can use air, you can use sunlight to produce energy within the system. And maybe there are also some sources which are not known till now. For example, an atom consists of 99.999 and so on percent of nothingness, of energy. So do we. So this is the third dimension, the fourth dimension of our action. We can use our vital energies, we can use our emotion, we can think and use our body. Actually, these four dimensions are not completely independent, but correlate. So, sin can be referred to our action with the body. Sin can be referred to a sinful thought or a bad emotion, which is where problems already begin Or sin could be done with energy. So let's go back. We've talked about the forms of action. There are only 4 forms which we can use. We can use our body, our mind, which comprises thinking and emotion, and we can use energy. So where is sin written? Let's assume we use these forms of action in order to do something sinful. Then where is sin recorded? Because the Bible talks about the phenomenon that even the descendants will suffer from that sin. So it has to be recorded somewhere. When we talk about recording something, we have to speak about memory. So which forms of memory are there? There is the memory inside our brain. There is the memory of our body. For example, when you ask yourself why your face looks like it looks, then it is because the body memorizes your ancestors. Then there is also the memory of genetics or epigenetics, which will become very crucial for our topic here. And there is evolutionary memory. Now in the brain there is verbal memory, non-verbal memory, conscious and non-conscious memory. So we are actually made up of all kinds of memories where sin could be written. So where is sin written? When even the descendants suffer from sin, where it is written. Now there is a survey with mouses. So we have one mouse, and there are 2 places where the mouse could eat, either there or there. Now the mouse later become babies, but these babies were separated from the mother immediately. The mother ate either there or they. At this place, the mouse was exposed to an electrical shock, which was very strong. So the mother learned very quickly that this is dangerous. So she always went here up to some point and stopped going here to eat. After she became her children, these children already knew that this place is dangerous. So they didn't went here, only here. This is the phenomenon of epigenetics. It is scientifically proven that without any communication, the descendants of this mouse will know that this is prohibited or somewhat dangerous. This gives us a clue how it is possible that even descendants suffer from sin. For example, when your parents fought in war, or your grandparents, they may may have killed many people and suffered from the feeling of guilt. This may have been so strong that they drank alcohol in order to process it. So let's go back to our list of contents. We now spoke about where sin could be written, namely in all forms of memory, including epigenetics. This already explains why our descendants could suffer from the consequences of intense emotions, for example after fighting in a war. The descendants may also have feelings of guilt or the feeling that they had to die. So we spoke about forms of memory and epigenetics. Now let's speak about the intensity of emotion in the amygdala a little bit more. Intensity of emotion. The intensity of emotion may be abbreviated by some letter I. So I signifies the intensity of emotion, which results from some action. For example, once again, somebody fought in war and killed somebody. This may have the consequence that he has very deep negative feelings. The intensity of emotion is a good measure for the severeness of sin. It is somehow proportional, or the stronger the intensity of emotion, the stronger the severeness of sin, and the more likely it is that descendants will suffer from the same thing also. The stronger the emotion, the more likely it is also that the experience will end up in the so-called amygdala, which is a part of the brain in which experiences are recorded, which are especially intense and maybe cause a trauma. So we spoke about intensity of emotion and how it is related to sin and sin of the descendants, or how the descendants suffer from sin. Now we have to speak about the origin of sin. Actually, the question whether or not all sins are equal signifies that there are sins which are worse and sins which are not so bad. But it would be wiser to ask, which is the origin of sin? Origin of sin. For example, nationality. Nationality or nationalism is the cause of wars. You believe in your country and you believe so intensely in your country or your ideal that you would fight a war for it. This is a good example for limited identity. You see, everybody who is in your country belongs to you, but everybody else doesn't belong to you. So your identity is limited to some country, and everybody here is a friend of yours. But once you go to another country, there are many enemies. A country or a nation has always limits. There are always people who are not in your nation. So you will always have friends and enemies. Therefore we call it limited identity. When you identify with your nation, you have a limited identity, and that's the reason why there are enemies, and therefore you are willing to go into a war. Always, when there is limited identity, there will be somebody who is disliked or even an enemy of yours. So, let's think about somebody who did not have a limited identity. Somebody who did not have a limited identity would also not have any enemy, because he would see everybody the same way. So limited identity is a cause of violence and aggression. But is it the one cause, or are there more causes? Now we have to think about the mind, the thinking. Thinking is always based on one identity. For example, you might identify with a moral codex and thus a certain community. Thinking can always only work on the basis of memory. You need to have some assumptions in order to think. Built on these assumptions or axioms, you can build some structure. For example, a philosophy or a mathematical theory. But even a single thought is only possible when you assume certain things and have a memory of the past. When there would be no assumption and no memory, you would not be able to think up anything. Now, assumptions are fixed memory, fixed statements like a moral codex, on which your philosophy, your psychological structure, your mathematical theory, or whatever is based on. Therefore, fixed assumptions are the basis of thinking. Or limited thinking, in the sense that your thoughts are based on some assumptions. Okay, that's trivial. Let's skip that. We have to ask ourselves, what is identity? Identity is everything which you think belongs to you or which you are. What are you? Now, you can either think about somebody who changes completely every day. He would not have any identity because he's so flexible that he's every day somebody else. Only the person who has habits, beliefs, fixed beliefs, traditions, persistent prejudices, and so on. Therefore, all fixed assumptions. Only this person knows who he is on the basis of these assumptions. Therefore, identity is a set of fixed assumptions about oneself, or not about oneself, doesn't matter. It is just that what you think about yourself couldn't change. For example, oh no, I don't do any sport because I'm not sporty. That's just the way I am. These people are always the same and can't find any solutions for their problem because they think it is intrinsic. So there are fixed assumptions, and therefore there is identity. Fixed assumptions are, or identity is the same. Now we can go back here to limited identity and think about the question whether or not limited identity is the only origin of sin, or criminalism, or violence and aggression. Is it the only reason for these things? No, maybe not. I think it is, but I am not able to reason why it should be like that right now. Limited identity means there are enemies. Enemies can only be there when there are likes and dislikes according to your beliefs. Through fixed assumptions, you start living in a dualism of likes and dislikes. For example, enjoy your life might be some of these beliefs. Then you will start hating everybody who works hard, or your teacher who tells you do your homeworks, or whatever. So there are likes and dislikes according to your beliefs. Let's assume for a while that you wouldn't identify with anything. Then you would be naked in the sense that you would see you are just life.